Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your host, Lynn, and today I'm joined by our very special guest, Brenda Florida. And today we're going to be talking about rebounding after setbacks and disappointments. Yep, getting back up, dusting yourself off, and carrying on. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Brenda because she's a longtime entrepreneur who has gone from being a successful franchisee with Domino's Pizza to working in real estate, to Googling homeless shelters, to creating a successful and growing online practice as a certified life coach. There were many steps in between, but that's part of the exciting journey that Brenda has had as an entrepreneur and her journey to embody queen energy. Oh, that's so incredible. I'm so excited. And Brenda is now a thriver as a writer, coach, and speaker because of the inner work she did, which inspires her to coach others to do the same. And that is just so inspirational, Brenda. We are so thrilled to have you here today. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Lynn, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right. Well, this is going to be an incredible conversation. I love the topic. And for anyone who's joining us for the first time, take that moment right now to hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and then you won't miss a single episode of Claim Your Career Crown. And while you're there, if you love the show and you love what we're doing, we would really appreciate a 5-star review. Okay, so let's get to it. Brenda, I know we gave a little bit of background, but I'd love to hear more about how you got into coaching and what that journey has been like.
Yes, well, thank you. And thanks again for letting me be here. Since we started in the bio with the Domino's Pizza thing, I'll give you a quick little background and then we'll jump fast forward into the coaching part. So, I franchised with Domino's Pizza with my husband at the time when I was very young. Like I was only 21, like 22. We'd been married a couple years. I already had two kids. I did everything very early in life. And we had a very straight trajectory up with Domino's. It was a great time in that company's history and its unfolding and growth. And we did so well by the time we were in our mid to late 20s. Like we had already experienced so much success. We sold our stores thinking life would just always be that way. We were these successful entrepreneurs. And of course, the next thing we did would be a success. And, of course it wasn't. And so that was my first setback, was just sort of the shock of like, no, wait, you mean everything I do isn't going to work, and then, the marriage had a lot of problems as well. And so that ended up being a fairly long but downward spiral, which also is what got me into real estate. I got into real estate partially because I was bored after we sold our Domino's franchise. And even though I had 4 kids from 0 to 7, I was intellectually bored. And you'll figure out here as we go along, I'm a very ambitious woman and always have been. And so, like, it wasn't enough, 4 kids, right? And so I got into real estate, and that trajectory was pretty, upwardly mobile without a lot of setbacks, little ups and downs. Did pretty well there. Then I decided to get into life coaching. Now, of course, I think my spiritual perspective is that everything happening in our lives is happening for our benefit and for our own growth, so we can keep moving forward. And the real setback, the Googling homeless shelters, which for anyone listening who has done that, like I am so with you, and it is so painful to be so at the end of your resources and the end of your rope that you're really facing that. This was not a hypothetical Google. This was, I think I had like $50 in my bank account, all the money I had to my name. I have no rich, family or something that's waiting to bail me out. No big alimony checks, no, nothing like that. The only good thing for me was my kids were grown. So at least I didn't have the added pressure of my kids being in that situation with me. But, and no place to live in 2 days. So and with $50, you don't have any money to even get an Airbnb,
Yeah.
and so that was very real. Now, what happened for me was I got a client that I didn't know, within that 48 hours that, the money came in and I booked that Airbnb.
Yeah.
But, I didn't know that when I was sitting there in my car Googling it. And so part of my message to all entrepreneurs or people, you don't have to be an entrepreneur for this to happen, is that we actually have within us so many resources. This is where I love your queen. I love, love, love the queen as an archetype. And there's so much power that she has, even when it would seem like from the external circumstances, let's say, an army has come to capture her kingdom or queendom, that are really available to her, including her own ability to trust in the unknown.
Yeah.
And I think I know in my path and this journey, because I had started my coaching practice, so here I am, a life coach. I invested so much money in myself, which is great, right? Theoretically, in joining masterminds and taking all these programs on how to build a coaching practice, and until literally I was broke, used all my credit, all my available credit, gave up my apartment because I was afraid I could see that if things kept going, I wouldn't be able to pay the rent, and I didn't want to get evicted because then, you go on a list of having
Yeah.
been evicted. Because I've been in real estate, like I knew what all that was about. So I gave up my apartment to go on this adventure thinking I'm going to Airbnb it and do a little couch surfing with friends and family for a few months, thinking, well, surely I'm going, because I'm a good coach. Even at that point, I knew I was good at what I was doing, and I knew I had the solid entrepreneurial skills. So I'm like, this is just a hiccup. Like, this is going to pick up tomorrow, and I'm going to be okay. And then nothing worked. All the best practices, all the everything, nothing worked. And at least now I have the ability to look at it in hindsight. I
Yes.
know that for me, it was about the journey of going through that hardship of how do I Google a homeless shelter and not lose hope? How do I do that and still believe that even though I don't know how it's going to happen, money could come to me
Yeah.
before I have to do that? And those are the deep practices of, it's mindset work, it's how you feel. It doesn't just work to say I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy in my head,
Yeah.
like you have to feel that possibility. That was the deep, deep work of the journey for me that brought me to the other side. And I wish I could say, oh, well, now I'm a, $1 million coach and there's just, no worries anywhere. Not the case. I didn't win any lotteries. Nobody died and left me a bunch of money. I just slowly, month by month, dug myself, just kept looking for the opportunities, and each month got a little better and a little better and a little better, until now I have my own place 2 blocks from the beach, which was always my dream, was to live close enough to walk to the beach. And, my stuff was in storage for almost 3 years. I mean, just to get my stuff out of storage and live with my own belongings was such a joy,
Yeah.
so I came through on the other side, as we all can, but man, it was slow and painful. It was 3 years. Like that's a long time to be in a downward spiral. So
Yeah.
part of my message is, wherever you're at, it's as horrible as this may sound, if you're in a bad spot, it's okay. And you can take that inner journey to trusting yourself, to getting out of it one step at a time.
Yeah.
I just talked for a long time. The one last thing I'll say, and then ask me whatever you want to ask me, is that this is where I also learned the dynamic of how I was really projecting all my power onto other people instead of owning it like the queen I am needed to do. That difference between talking about our power and really owning our power instead of projecting it onto my husband or the people I was working with in real estate or these really smart people I took all these masterminds from and stuff, to really be able to own that I had the power to create my own business and I didn't need this external circumstance to make it possible for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally understand where you're coming from on that sense of what we do, to build up our own business. And I'm really quite fascinated to learn more about, because you've alluded to several of the things that you did, but I'd really like to hear more about what you did to build your business and what resources you leveraged.
Yes. So I love to talk about this. Part I alluded to with the thought and the feeling piece. So one of the things I realized from the abundance standpoint, from the financial standpoint, was that I just knew I had come far enough in my journey to know that worrying about how little money I had and how few resources I had was not going to help me get more resources. It was not going to help me show up on a Facebook Live or, whatever in the social, because as a coach, right, I'm growing my online business primarily in social media. How am I going to show up, or blogging from my email list and whatever? How am I going to show up and do that if I am drowning in fear and scarcity? So that's where I made that leap. And I say this a lot. There's such a big difference between an affirmation and something, a mantra, I'll say, not that that's a super important word, but I'll just use it that way, that works. Because a lot of times we can say to ourselves, oh, whatever, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful. My business is growing, my business is growing. But if we can't feel the truth of that, if we can't conjure up an emotional state, a feeling state of, I am freaking abundant. Sure, there's $50 in my bank, but abundance is more than that. I can bring in more than that. There are infinite possibilities. I would do it a lot by going to nature. So for about a year of this 3-year period, closer to 2 maybe, I was in Southern California and I could get to the beach. I can drive there. There's no charge for parking in the places I would go. So as long as I had the gas money, I could get myself to the beach. And I would just walk the beach saying that, like, conjuring up that feeling of abundance. Look at all the sky, look at all the water, look at all the palm trees. Look, there's abundant, the birds, all the things, so that I could feel abundant, not just say words over and over in my head. And so that's where a lot of times, if you feel like your mantras or, affirmations or however you think of them aren't working, it's because there's a disconnect between the head and the feeling state.
Yeah.
And it really takes bringing those two together in alignment for me, before I could cross over into the trust and out of the anxiety of fear. Because when you're thinking it and feeling it, even though you've got external evidence that doesn't support it yet, the possibility of it feels so much more real. You can choose to live in that possibility. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Did I describe
Oh,
that well?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love your connection with nature. I mean, one of the things that I do as well is I actually love like trail walks, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
lucky enough to have a park really close by that has a short trail walk, but you can do this trail walk, the round trip in, 20 minutes. So it is
Okay.
a short trail walk, but you're still and it's the same thing. It's sort of like you get back in tune with, breathing and letting your mind flow, but really looking at all the other things, like look at how green a leaf could be, or how, you know beautiful at this time of year, a twig looks that still has maybe an oak tree with an oak leaf still stuck to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whatever that happens to be, but you're really tying into your other senses,
Mhm.
and that flow. So I definitely can make that connection. And
Mhm.
I also see that there's another connection that you've made, just not totally outright, but you've been talking about how you're going to overcome these self-limiting beliefs.
Mhm.
And I truly believe that we all have those to some
Mhm.
extent or another, and we keep piling on bricks to reinforce that self-limiting belief. And
Yes.
instead, what we need to be doing is recognizing it is a self-limiting belief, and then what are the steps that we can take to first see that, to open our
Mhm.
eyes, to shift our viewpoint, and then to start taking those bricks down.
Yes, yes, yes. Because part of the journey for, you're right, part of that journey for me was how, because I have a very, I love lofty ideas and big thinking and, all that, the big ideas of all of it. But I'm also very pragmatic. So then I'm like, well, okay, exactly to your question a moment ago. Great, let's talk. You can talk about abundance, but how do you really, like, how do you do that? How do you really recover? How do you really, so I always want to get into that. And that's what actually took me eventually to birthing what now I call the solve it method, which we can talk about a little bit later. But it is that it's using our, it's really resources we already have is one thing I always like people to know. One, I work a lot with people pleasers. And so I'm sure a lot of your audience will relate to that, where, we just have grown up with these, they really are limiting beliefs, but they aren't always identified that way. But it's this idea that my job really in life is somehow to just do for others, please others, make others happy, keep groups of people happy, not rock the boat, even when it hurts me, even when it's at my own expense. That's what I'm supposed to do. Well, that's a limiting belief. And it's very not queenly,
Yeah.
okay? um, and it's just a habit. One of the little transitions I was able to make in my own mind during this time was the sort of distinction between thinking, well, that's just who I am. This is who I am, okay? Which we all do that. To wait a minute, maybe that's just a habit I picked up.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it for so long, I think it's who I am. But is it really, and really being able to challenge myself, not in an unkind way? One thing I want to say, whenever we are in judgment or criticism of ourselves,
Yeah.
that is never the path, right?
Yeah.
That is never leading us to our next breakthrough. That's leading us to another downward spirals. But when
Yeah.
I'm in my queen energy,
Yeah.
I can see it all. When I'm in my divinity, when I'm connected to the deeper place of truth within me, whatever words anybody likes to use for that, we know in there somewhere deep inside that we
Right.
have everything we need. We just might need somebody else to help us find it because our habits have hidden it from us.
Right.
So in my habit of people pleasing, I didn't really feel like I had any personal power.
Right.
I had ambition and I had drive and I was a hard worker and I could do. So I relied on those things. But that's not where my genius really is. Who I am is deeper than that and it never leaves me. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think that that's that part of that awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And then also sometimes you need that guide. I mean, for me, a big part of that was learning how to say no, this
Yes.
constant, and to just literally, I call it a powerful pause, but just stop and take that moment to
Mm-hmm.
pause and think and say, because you can say no gracefully.
Yes.
And when you're like same thing. I wouldn't call myself a pleaser, but a giver.
Okay.
Then you have to still stop and say, no, I can't
Yes.
give, because there's going to be
Yes.
nothing left. To your point,
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
have to have some me time. I get to
Mhm.
watch my rom-com tonight.
Yes.
I
Whatever it is.
whatever it is, right? And also, to some point, you have to say no to things that aren't really going to serve, your purpose, or where that your journey, where you can see that roadmap is headed. There are
Yeah.
times that, it's just the timing isn't right.
Yes.
And it's like, oh man, this would be so amazing to do this, but am I just spreading myself too thin? And
Hmm.
sometimes you do have to say no to things that could be a great opportunity. And
Yes.
I know that recently the same thing. I mean, I had opportunity to get onto the Win-Win Women Network, back well, obviously several months ago and everything. And, but I just realized that the amount of bandwidth that would
Hmm.
take, to do that. And it was sort of like, well, what do I, and it's, sometimes you have to definitely think like, well, just because I'm giving something up, you're getting a whole bunch in return. But in that
Hmm.
situation and looking at everything, I was just like, that's just something that's not right for me at this point in time.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
taking that moment, because I was like all for it, and I literally was ready to sign up, and I went, wait, stop, hold on a
Hmm.
minute, and
Hmm.
I got to think about this, and
Yes.
so, and I think that, that could be really play into this idea of, or your, it's not really an idea, but it's really that concept and how you can adopt this abundance mindset.
Hmm.
And so I'd love to hear more about that, because it's just not enough to say, hey, I've got all this, and I'm
Hmm.
liberated now. So,
Hmm.
why don't you dive in a little bit deeper? Because I'd love to hear
Yes.
more.
So one thing that so there's several different things I do. One of the things that I like to do is to remind myself that I don't need a particular circumstance in order to create something. And neither does anybody else. I'm not unique in this, right? We all really can create out of nothing.
Yeah.
And we've done it over and over. But when we've had setbacks, it's very hard to remember that we have that power of creation, that I don't need, that I could wake up with a good idea tomorrow, right? I mean, I don't know today that that's what's going to happen, but it can happen as simply as that, you know?
Yeah.
And so being able to, again, get in a state, so a feeling state that has thoughts that match it of, no, wait a minute, I've done this before. And that's a lot of it. So, one thing I would say, again, super pragmatic, but we'll go with this non sexy part, right? Um, our mind just wants to be right. That's it. Like, that's as simple as mindset is. It wants to be right all the time. So as soon as we have the setback or the failure, whether it could be minuscule or huge, right away the mind is thinking, the mindset piece kicks in and you have all these thoughts. Oh my gosh, it's happening again, or how am I going to recover? Um, it's telling you, reminding you of other failures. Oh, remember when this happened, that happened, because you're in failure mode and your mind wants to be right.
Yeah.
So it's going to dismiss every success you've ever had. Those things are not going to exist. So almost like it's a 2-year old. I mean, sometimes it's kind of this simple, but not that it's easy. I would just have to say, like, stop it, and I would really catch myself with that and say, this is not helping me. Reviewing every time I've slipped and fallen is not going to help me. Wait a minute. I must have had some successes in my life. What were they? When did I get what I wanted? Because that's also a thing that usually comes with a lack of abundance or any sort of setback, is you feel there's something around, you might use different words than I'm using, but something around, I don't get what I want,
Yeah.
and it feels very, you feel very victimized by your circumstances. So the way out is to get out of that and feel powerful. Possibility and power kind of go hand in hand without that. So then I would just and I've done this with clients. I would say, like, go write a list of 50. It needs to be a lot because it gets us out of, into a new mindset, things that you're really good at.
Yeah.
Or if they're having a personal, like a self-esteem plummet, forget any like talent or skill. I don't care if you're a good cooker. I want you to tell me 50 awesome things about who you are.
Yeah.
Okay. So making yourself, because then the mind's going to want to prove that right. Once it gets down a track, it's like the neural pathways in our brains. Once we start working on a new path, oh, it's going to want to go there. It's going to, oh, yeah. And remember that, and remember that, and remember that, because it just wants to be right. So we need to give it an assignment that being right is going to serve us instead of continue to hurt us.
Yeah.
Does that
No,
make
I
sense?
mean, it does. It does. It's really, I love the perspective because when I come at things, I sort of turn it a very different way. And as an example, when we did our first course that we launched, no one bought it. And, yeah, you could say it was a complete flop, you know, but I took this step back and said, okay, well, what did we learn from this? I mean, we've gained a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of experience. We've done this now. We've
Mm-hmm.
cracked the code. And
Mm-hmm.
how can we leverage what we learned and how can we use it? And so
Yes.
that's one of the things that I guess for me, and I think that's one reason like the movie Captain Marvel really sort of hit it for me hard because she keeps falling or wrecking her
Yes.
go-kart or and she picks herself up and she's going, I'll do it again. I'm going to go at it
Yes.
again. And that and of course every time we can do that and we can go, okay, it's like for me, it's also like putting back in our mind, well, how did we ever learn how to ride a bike? I don't know about
Yes.
you, but I had the skinned knees, hands, chins,
Yes.
but I kept getting back on that bike and I'd
Yes.
do something a little different. And it didn't take that long. And we were riding our bike all over the
Yes.
neighborhood, going to see my
Yes.
friends, doing little activities together, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so as adults, I think that's one part of that neural pathway that we start to block is
Mm-hmm.
that ability to that we have to fail. We have to fall
Mm-hmm.
down. We have to skin our chin sometimes so that
Mm-hmm.
we can figure out how to do it better and not skin our chin.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
what,
And what I love
so,
about how you communicated that is all your language there was very full of, possibility and positivity. And so that's how we know, because the other trick the mind will play when it's in a criticism judgment
yeah,
downward spiral is as if somehow being super critical is what's going to help you find the right way to do it next time or a better way. That's how you're going to learn your lesson, right? Because we get that a lot. We get punished. We got to learn our lesson, get spanked, all this little kid stuff. And I was raised in a fundamentalist religious environment that was very punitive. And so there we get this idea that we have to be hard on ourselves, that we have to have that judgment or we're going to make the same mistake again. And actually, none of that is true. We really, where there is a lesson to be learned, where there is something we could, do differently next time, whatever, all those things, they really come to us when we're seeing the scenario through compassion and that and a possibility. So the question is that, well, where did we screw up so we don't screw up again, right? It's what you said. It's like, well, how can we leverage this? Well, now we've done it. We'll never have to launch our first course again, you know? And that will take you to an idea, then maybe totally out of the blue or in the shower that night, you're like, oh, I could this,
Yeah.
that's what that gives birth to. Whereas that other neuro pathway of judgment and criticism and harshness that says it's there to help you, that's the big lie.
Yeah.
It is not, it's there to keep you stuck in the mindset and the place you have been so you can keep struggling with that same setback over and over, whether it has a different face or not. You just keep struggling through it again. When we can meet ourselves in love and compassion, then we can actually look at it and go, oh, okay, I probably should pivot on this or do, like whatever. It's coming from possibility, not you big screw up. What are you going to do now?
Yeah.
And that's a huge, it's a big shift. It's easier to say than it is to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I appreciated, your approach to that. And in fact, the course has turned out to help many people. Turned it
Yeah.
into a free course. And so in that way, we're helping others and feel great
Mhm.
about it, and they become fans. And so it's a
Yes.
beautiful thing. And you have to look, it's not just looking for that silver lining, it's recognizing that it's always there. It's just sometimes it's
Yes.
hard to see, but it
Yeah.
is always there. And if you're not seeing it, then, you know, go to the beach, take a nature
Yeah.
walk,
Go take
whatever
a
it
walk
is.
in the woods or whatever.
And I
Yes.
think this ties into what you call your solve it method, because that probably is going to
Yes.
help you see that there is a possibility, there's abundance, there is that silver
Yes.
lining, so that
Yeah.
you can move forward. And I'd love to hear how that works.
Yes. So the solve it method really just came out of my own kind of self coaching, right? That after I had done it with myself, then I naturally started doing it with other clients. And then later, like a year later, I realized there was actually a process I was doing,
Right.
and I could name it. And it was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. So it has four components, or you could think of them as lenses, okay, to look at any problem that you're having. And I use
Yeah.
word problem loosely. It covers everything. It could be, I don't feel seen and heard in my marriage. I just, Googled homeless shelters. It could be anything. Okay. But whatever feels like the problem, the setback, the whatever. And you look at it through the four lenses of desire, thoughts, feelings, and action. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and they don't, it's not a hierarchy. It's doesn't matter which way you go through them, all of that. But the point being, I had, for instance, when I'm having all these setbacks financially and everything I'm trying in my coaching business isn't working, I could go back to desire and say, okay, wait a minute, is a private online coaching practice still what I want? Is it really the
Yeah.
desire of my heart? And what I had done in an effort, I loved when you were talking about saying no. So so I totally agree that we have to say no to certain opportunities because that's the only thing allows us to say yes to something else that maybe we don't even know about yet, but what the other way that it came into play for me, the yes part was I started saying yes to whatever clients showed up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even afford a place to live. And what happened was I ended up taking on one business client, a creative entrepreneur coach, and they're usually very disorganized and they have a hard time staying on track and whatever. And I'm very organized and detail oriented and all these things. So I'm like, sure, I can organize your business. I can get you focused. I can, and then another one showed up and all of a sudden my coaching practice has evolved into my ideal client being creative entrepreneurs. So even that I had to say, wait a minute, is that my desire? Is that so? It's not just enough to ask, is a coaching practice my desire?
Right.
Yes, and that felt very true for me. But then I had to drill down because something was still wrong, right? So I had to drill down and say, now wait a minute, I think what might be wrong is I'm not loving my clients, actually. I'm not loving the work I'm doing with them. I'm good at it, but I don't love it, you know? So then I had to say no to that, which opened the door to really articulating people pleasers, which opened all kinds of other doors, but I didn't know that when I started letting those business clients go. And so that was scary. But so you have to, desire is sometimes a little more, difficult than it sounds on the surface. As people pleasers, and this happens all the time with married people, it happens with business partners. We can take on somebody else's desire as
Yeah.
if it's our own when it's not. So, anyway, there's things to look at with desire. There are things to then look at with your thoughts. And just so this doesn't get confusing, let's say I'm spot on with my desire. I've gotten on track. My desire is a coaching practice focused on people pleasers as my client, because I've been on that journey and I got that. And so I've got that, but I'm having all kinds of thoughts that are, it's not going to work, it's not going to work fast enough, it's not, then you got to find those thoughts that are getting in your way, that are the limiting beliefs, that are, I don't get to, that's where I found, and I didn't know this was there, that's where I realized that in truth, the other times in my life I was successful, I really emotionally and mindset wise gave the credit to the men that I was either married to, or that I just happened, when I worked in real estate, men are usually the brokers.
Yeah.
It just happens to be a highly white male environment. And I really was giving them the credit instead of myself. So there's this digging into the thoughts that are
Yeah.
not helping you, which helps you find new thoughts that can help you. Okay.
Right.
And then there's the feelings, because thoughts and feelings are never, they're like kissing cousins. They're always right next to each other. You don't have thoughts without feelings. You don't have feelings without thoughts. So where are my feelings dragging me down? And then what feeling states do I need to create so that I can feel abundant instead of poor? Right?
Right.
Okay. So those two go together. We have to look at that. And then the other piece is action. And actually, action is the place where people often will find their problem, because they're not taking the action they need to take to get the result they say they want.
Right.
And so a lot of people, right, they'll come to us for coaching because this problem is something they're not doing, or they can't do it consistently, or they can't make it happen, some kind of action oriented piece.
Right.
And that ends up being really the opening to, oh, well, then let's look at the desire. Is
Yeah.
it yours? Is it something a little different? Is it, if once we get the desire in place, then it's only our thoughts and our feelings that are taking us off track from the action we need to make it happen. So you got to
Yeah.
look at all four of them kind of separately, and then they all kind of, when you're in alignment, it's like they all lock together and create this beautiful I don't know the metaphor right there, but a beautiful thing. It's like all the petals of the flower, spread and open, and it's like, oh, this all works now, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's a super powerful process. And I do have it, I created it as a program too, besides the fact that I use it all the time when I'm coaching. But I did a digital course for it because I'm like, this is actually something people can do themselves. And
Right.
I know that when I was in these 3 years where I was hurting so,
Yeah.
I needed, one of my big lessons was to ask for help,
Right.
and I needed things at all sorts of different price points because I didn't have money to spend on a lot of expensive coaching, but I needed help. So I like in my own offerings to have things that are inexpensive, to be, I've had people I've ended up coaching for almost nothing because they just had that, you know, true need, because people did that for me. And I like to give back, when somebody's really suffering and I can tell they're the kind of person I can help, to do that, because asking for help is a really powerful thing that most of us, especially if you relate to being a pleaser or a giver, we're not accustomed to doing. And so that's, I think, another big piece.
Right. Yeah. No, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I agree that's so important. And this solve method is really brilliant. So for anyone who's listening here and they've recently experienced a failure or a setback, they
Mhm.
flipped off that rope, climbing up this or they flipped their go-kart and Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
What's a first step that they can take to get back on track?
I love the idea of looking at desire, of
Okay.
just sort of a reset and allow yourself, like I like to think, if I had amnesia, if I got hit in the head and I knew nothing about my history, nothing about what I've done, nothing that I think I like or don't like, right? I'm a clean slate. It's that the Buddhists would call it the don't know mind. What would I want to do? What would make me happy? So you got to be careful in that, not what's expected of you, not what
Yeah.
somebody else needs from you, none of that. Just get to yourself. And maybe the only thing you can think of, like there were days, it was just like, I could just have to walk on the beach. I don't know. I have no idea what I want in the grand scheme of things, but getting my feet in the sand will feel good. Then just go do that and trust that as your feet are in the sand, something else will open up and open up. We all have a tendency to want to see way down the road, and what are the next 20 steps so I can plan for those. And the truth is, especially when we've had a setback or any extended period of difficulty, we got
Right.
to bring that vision way in. What do I need
Right.
in the next 5 minutes? What can I think of that would make me happy? That isn't destructive. Okay. That isn't destructive. So having 3 bottles of wine might sound like it'll make you feel happy, but it won't.
Yeah.
So those things that are just like, ooh, I want to call this person and have a chat. I don't want to talk about. I would tell my children, don't ask me how I'm doing, like how's the business or how, whatever. Because of course my kids, they're all adults, they're all doing really well in their lives. They're super worried about their mom, right? They don't really know all the details until they listen to this podcast, but they know it's been bad. And so I would just say, don't ask me that. I'll tell you if I need some help with something or if I want to talk about it. But much like a person who has a difficult diagnosis or a terminal
Yeah.
diagnosis, you just don't want everybody asking you all the time because you don't want to tell the story. You don't want to lie, or I didn't. I want to be like, oh, it's great. I have no clients. But I didn't want to talk about it because that wasn't going to help me get my next client.
Right.
So being able, again, very queenly, to set your boundaries and say, if this topic, let me bring it up. If I don't bring it up, please don't ask me. I know you love me and you care, but that's what's going to be the most helpful to me.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean,
So,
that's a great piece of advice, and I would absolutely concur. Thank you, Brenda, so much for sharing about your journey,
mm,
so much about your personal vulnerability and how
mm,
you've gotten where you are, and how others can overcome setbacks and ultimately thrive. That's so
mm.
powerful. I know that our listeners are going to want to know more about where they can find out more about you.
Yes, thank you. I have loved our conversation. So the two easiest ways, my website is very simple to remember because it's my name, brendaflorida.com. And it has everything from my podcast to the Solve It method to, everything is there on my website. And then on Instagram, I'm Brenda Florida Coach. So you just have to remember to put the coach after it, but Brenda Florida Coach on Instagram, brendaflorida.com is my website, and everything is in those two places.
All right, perfect. And we'll be sure to include all those links below so that they're a click away. And for everyone who joined us, thank you so much for being here. I hope you had a fantastic time with this inspiring episode with Brenda. And if you have ideas that you'd like to share, you can leave us a comment down below. We love hearing your thoughts. And if you have a question or would like to suggest a topic for discussion, you can email us at join the conversation at petitequeen.com. and of course to stay current on all of our incredible resources, the everything that we do, including these incredible episodes like the one with Brenda today, you can sign up for our weekly wisdoms newsletter at petitetoqueen.com. Thank you again for everyone who's tuned in. And Brenda, thank you so much. This has been such an incredible, inspiring, wow, just like life affirming episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you and with your listeners.